What I'm about to reveal to you is something almost nobody talks about. There's a hidden mechanism that every woman's brain runs without her even noticing, and it has nothing to do with what she says out loud. It has to do with what she remembers, but not just any memory, a very specific kind of memory. There's one particular detail that when she brings it back, it means exactly one thing. She's already attached to you. And today, as a woman, I'm going to expose that mechanism. Before we go further, I need you to understand something fundamental. A study conducted at Stanford University found that women retain emotionally relevant information about a person up to 3 times longer than neutral information. That means while she's telling you, "Oh, I don't really remember," her brain has already filed you away in a completely different folder. And here's where it gets revealing. Researchers discovered that when a woman starts developing real emotional attachment, her memory system begins prioritizing details about that specific person almost involuntarily. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, a pioneer in the neuroscience of emotion, found that the brain tags memories linked to people we care about with a chemical marker that makes them nearly impossible to forget. So why do you keep assuming she forgot when she probably didn't? As a woman, I can tell you something. We are experts at pretending we don't remember when we actually remember everything. It's not manipulation, it's instinct. Our female ancestors developed this as a survival mechanism. A prehistoric woman couldn't just walk up to a man and say, "I've been thinking about you," because that made her vulnerable. So the female brain built a quiet memory system instead, one that stores everything and reveals itself only in small, careful moments. What I'm going to share with you today are exactly those moments. Some are obvious once you know them, but most men spend their entire lives without ever catching them. And the sad part is, you've probably had women in front of you quoting something you said weeks ago, practically handing you proof that they were thinking about you, and you just brushed past it like it was nothing. But that ends today. Because by the end of this video, you're going to be able to tell the difference between a woman who's simply being polite and a woman who's already emotionally invested. And I'll warn you, once you know this, you're not going to be able to unsee it. Now, there's something I need to mention before we go on. Not every remembered detail means the same thing. There's a huge difference between a woman remembering something out of basic courtesy and a woman remembering something because it mattered to her. I'm going to teach you to tell them apart with surgical precision, but first let's talk about the most revealing category of all. Let's start with the one that's most well known and least understood, the small offhand comment. You've probably heard that if a woman remembers a tiny thing you said in passing, she's interested, but that's a half-truth, and half-truths are worse than lies. See, women remember small things constantly. We remember what people order at restaurants, what shirt someone wore, random facts people mention out of habit. So how do you know when it actually means something? I'm going to explain it exactly. The difference lies in 3 factors: timing, context, and delivery. When a woman feels genuine attachment, she brings the detail back at an unrelated moment, days or even weeks later, completely out of context, as if it had been sitting there waiting for the right moment to resurface. It's not a practical recall, it's an emotional one. The brain naturally discards information that isn't emotionally significant within about 24 hours, unless something reinforces it. When she brings up something you said with precision, days later, unprompted, her primitive brain is saying, "This mattered enough for me to keep it." Millions of years of emotional wiring don't disappear just because we now have group chats. But there's more. Pay attention to the delivery. If she brings it up casually, almost shyly, sometimes even catching herself mid-sentence, like she wasn't supposed to admit she remembered, that's the tell. Admitting memory is a small act of exposure. It's a gesture of trust and vulnerability. When she says, "Wait, didn't you say you don't like coriander?" Out of nowhere, she's communicating something without meaning to. I've been carrying this around. A study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that women brought up small, specific details about a romantic interest 61% more often than they did about platonic acquaintances, almost double. That's not a coincidence. Now, the third factor, the framing. If she remembers something while glancing at her phone or half distracted, it probably doesn't mean much. But if she says it while looking straight at you, even briefly, with a small pause before or after, you just received a signal, and most men miss it because they don't know how to read it. Here's something almost nobody points out. The type of memory matters too. There's a difference between remembering a fact, like your job or your hometown, which is practical information, and remembering an opinion or a feeling you expressed, which is emotional information. The first says, "I was listening." The second says, "I was paying attention to who you actually are." Also notice if it happens repeatedly. One remembered detail could be a coincidence. 3 or 4 across a single conversation is a pattern. Patterns don't lie, but here's something that's about to shift your entire perspective. Remembering small comments isn't the strongest signal, it's just the opening course. What comes next is where things get genuinely interesting. If small comments are the opening course, preferences are the main dish, and I'll explain exactly why. From a psychological angle, almost nobody mentions. Preferences require active mental effort to retain. They're not automatically stored the way facts are. Retaining someone's preferences requires the brain to build an entire internal model of that person, and building models is expensive, biologically speaking. So when a woman remembers your coffee order, your favorite song, or the way you take your steak, she's done something far more demanding than simple recall. But not every remembered preference carries the same weight. Here's the key difference. If she asks you again every single time, like double-checking, that usually signals uncertainty or habit. But if she just knows, if she orders for you without asking, adjusts something without a word, remembers without ever being reminded, that's different, very different. Researchers at the University of Toronto found that when women feel real emotional investment, the brain allocates additional working memory, specifically to details about that person, almost as if a private folder opens just for them. It's as if the mind wants to make room specifically for you. And now let's talk about routines. This category is fascinating because it's where memory turns into anticipation. When she remembers your schedule, your gym days, the show you're currently watching, pay very close attention. If she brings it up while looking at you and smiling, she's doing something called quiet tracking. She's essentially been keeping a mental timeline of your life running in the background while maintaining contact with you. A study in evolutionary psychology found that women were 42% more likely to recall someone's weekly schedule when they considered that person attractive compared to acquaintances they felt neutral about. But here's an observation almost nobody makes. The small logistical details. What time you usually text. When you're normally free. Which days you're busiest. These are some of the most intimate pieces of information that stay hidden in plain conversation. When a woman brings one of these up unprompted while talking to you, it's almost like she's signaling, "I've been paying attention to your rhythm." That's tremendously revealing. Now I need to pause here to mention something important. All of this works in context. A woman who just met you and already remembers small logistical details might be genuinely interested, or she might simply have a sharp memory in general. The key is watching for change in behavior and noticing whether she remembers things about you more than she remembers things about other people around her. That's your answer. And speaking of answers, what comes next is what most people consider the strongest indicator of all. But before we get there, I need you to understand something about stories that's going to surprise you. We've reached sacred territory, stories, and what I'm about to tell you here will probably make you rethink a lot of past conversations. Personal stories carry the highest emotional density of anything we share. They're layered with vulnerability, and that's exactly why when a woman brings one of yours back to you unprompted, she's activating something deeper than simple memory. But first, let me walk you through the different types of story recall and what each one means. Bringing back a story you told about your childhood is probably the most emotionally significant of all. When a woman does this while listening to you talk about something else, she's creating a direct link in her mind between who you were and who you are now, saying without words, "I'm building a fuller picture of your whole life." Then there's referencing a story about something difficult you went through. This has been studied extensively by relationship researchers like Dr. John Gottman, who explains that recalling a partner's hardships is a bonding behavior rooted in what he calls emotional bank accounts. Literally, we are storing your pain and your wins as if they were our own. When a woman brings up something hard you went through, unprompted, with genuine concern in her voice, she's investing in you. Think about that. Bringing back a story you told as a joke has a slightly different meaning. This gesture is more associated with genuine enjoyment. If she quotes something funny you said weeks ago, she's not just remembering it, she's replaying it, which means it's still living somewhere in her head. It isn't as directly emotional, but it shows that your presence lingers in her thoughts, even when you're not there, which in today's world of constant distraction is already significant. Now, something that truly separates genuine attachment, connecting two different stories you told at different times. When we feel real attachment, the brain naturally starts cross-referencing information about that person, linking pieces together to build a coherent narrative. Connecting two stories can simply be a sign of a sharp memory, but it's also a gesture the brain recognizes as relationship building, subtle but tremendously revealing. A study out of the University of Cambridge found that people could correctly predict whether a woman was emotionally invested in a man with 74% accuracy just by observing how she referenced his past stories during a conversation. Stories don't lie. And here's something crucial. Frequency matters just as much as the gesture itself. One recalled story could be anything. But if you notice that throughout your time together, she references multiple things you've told her, especially during moments where you're being vulnerable, or when there's a quiet pause with real eye contact, you have a clear signal. But wait, because there's a combination that's practically foolproof. When she references a story you told her while adding a detail you didn't even expect her to catch, combined with a soft laugh and lingering eye contact, you just received the clearest signal of attachment that female emotional psychology can offer without saying it outright. However, all of this pales compared to what comes next, because up until now we've talked about passive memory, about what she quietly retains, but there's a completely different level involving something far more direct. Before we get to that direct level, we need to talk about a fascinating middle ground, mentioning you to other people. When a woman feels attachment toward you, but isn't fully ready for direct vulnerability, she channels that connection through the people around her. And this is absolutely fascinating from a psychological standpoint. Notice how she brings you up in stories about her day. If she does it casually, almost naturally weaving you into unrelated conversations, she's projecting. When our brain wants to talk about someone, but there's a social boundary preventing full openness, it redirects that impulse through third-party mentions instead. Her friends are another crucial indicator, but not in the way you'd think. If her friends already seem to know small facts about you before you've even met them, that's a sign. But if those facts are oddly specific, your habits, your opinions, tiny things you mentioned once, she's been talking about you far more than casual interest would explain. Family mentions are another revealing territory. When a woman brings you up to her family, even in passing, she's doing something doubly significant. First, she's introducing a new element into her closest circle, which we already discussed. But second, she's testing the waters of integration, another emotionally loaded zone. It's as if the subconscious is saying, "I'm nervous, but I want them to know you exist." And here's an observation few people make. Pay attention to whether she brings you up in conversations where you technically have no reason to be mentioned. For example, if she's telling a story about her weekend and inserts an unrelated detail about you. She's crossing into territory that has nothing to do with the original story. It's an unconscious rehearsal for bringing you fully into her world. There's also anniversaries and dates. When a woman remembers the exact day you met, or the exact week something significant happened between you, especially the smaller ones, she's marking the timeline in a way that matters emotionally, even if she never admits it out loud. Now, all of this has been preparation, because what marks the real turning point is when she takes the final step, and that step involves bringing something up directly, to your face, unprompted. We've reached the moment of truth, the direct callback. And as a woman, I'm going to reveal exactly what each type of remembered detail means when she brings it up to you personally. Let's start with something that seems obvious, but has layers most people miss: remembering your exact words. When a woman quotes something you said, word for word, weeks or even months later, she's crossing a crucial psychological threshold, but the meaning shifts depending on how, when, and in what tone she does it. A brief mention while laughing about something you said is the baseline level of interest. It says, "I like you. Being around you is enjoyable." But when the quote comes with a pause before she says it, when she hesitates slightly, like she's deciding whether to admit she remembers, that changes everything. That hesitation is intentional, even if she doesn't consciously realize it. Bringing up a compliment you gave her weeks later is more intimate territory. Repeating a compliment requires deeper emotional processing and generally indicates a higher level of comfort. If she tells you she still thinks about something nice you said, she's establishing an emotional bond out loud. But here's where it gets truly revealing: remembering something you told her in confidence. If she brings up something you shared privately, even briefly, even in passing, you just received one of the clearest signals possible. Private information is personal territory. We don't hold on to just anyone's secrets. And if you want the ultimate proof, notice if she creates excuses to bring it up. You mentioned something like that before, while referencing something small you said in confidence. "I remember you telling me that," while bringing up something emotionally significant. These apparently casual callbacks are anything but casual. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that memory recall, initiated by women, increased by 88% when they were with men they found emotionally significant. 88%. That statistic should tell you everything. Now there's a callback that's practically a declaration of intent, remembering the exact reason something upset her, and later showing you she noticed you changed because of it. If she remembers a small conflict and brings up how differently you handled it the second time, that's relationship territory. Nobody tracks emotional growth in someone they don't care about, and the birthday. If she remembers your birthday without being told, especially if she brings it up early, without any reminder, you just received a green light. Remembering a birthday unprompted is intimate territory. It isn't something you do for casual acquaintances. But I'm going to give you the master key here. The strongest signal isn't a single memory, it's the progression. If you notice her recall escalating from something neutral, like a factual detail, towards something more personal, like a preference, and then towards something intimate, like a private confession or your birthday, you're watching an escalation of attachment happening in real time, and there's something more you need to understand that ties everything together. Now that you know the signals, you need to understand the why. Because when you understand the psychology behind the behavior, you can read it with far more precision. Memory is one of the earliest tools the human brain developed to build trust. Long before language became sophisticated, we survived by remembering who helped us and who didn't. That's why memory is so deeply tied to our emotions and our most basic instincts. When a woman develops real attachment, her hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for forming and organizing memories, becomes significantly more active around information tied to that specific person. This heightened activity increases the depth and permanence of memories connected to you. The brain is literally prioritizing you over background noise. That's why these recall behaviors increase when attachment is present. The brain needs to organize this new emotionally significant information somehow. Additionally, remembering something and voicing it back releases oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone. Every time she brings something back to you, even briefly, it creates a small dose of oxytocin, both in her and in you. The subconscious knows this and uses shared memory as a tool for connection. But here's something fascinating. Women are generally more detail-oriented in social memory than men in casual settings. However, that detail retention increases significantly with people we're attracted to. The key is to notice whether she remembers things about you specifically more than she remembers things about others in the same environment. Psychologist Dr. Arthur Aron, known for his research on interpersonal closeness, proposes that shared memory recall during courtship functions as a kind of relationship audit. We bring things back to measure your reaction. If you respond warmly, we deepen the connection. If you seem indifferent, we pull back. It's a constant feedback loop operating almost entirely below conscious awareness. That's why it's so important not just to detect these signals, but to respond appropriately. When she brings something back and you light up, lean in slightly, and acknowledge it warmly, you're giving her permission to keep opening up. If you shrug it off or don't react, you're sending a signal of disinterest. And this brings us to something crucial that a lot of men don't understand. Knowing the signals is useless if you make these fatal mistakes. Mistake number 1. Overinterpreting a single memory. One remembered detail doesn't mean she wants to marry you. You need to look for patterns, multiple signals, consistency. Context is king. Mistake number 2. Ignoring signs of emotional distance. Yes, it's important to detect interest, but it's just as important to detect disinterest. If she forgets things about you constantly, mixes up basic details, or seems disengaged when you talk, respect that. Negative signals matter just as much as positive ones. Mistake number 3, failing to take action. It's pointless to become an expert at reading these signals if you never do anything with the information. A lot of men become experts at noticing attachment, but never take the next step. These signals are an invitation, but invitations don't last forever. Mistake number 4, being too obvious about testing her memory. If you spend the whole conversation quizzing her to see what she remembers, you're going to come across as strange and calculated. The observation has to stay natural, peripheral, woven into a normal interaction. Mistake number 5, forgetting that you're sending signals too. While you're paying attention to her, she's paying attention to you. Your own behavior largely shapes how open she feels to sharing what she remembers. If you're distracted, dismissive, or checked out, she's probably not going to feel comfortable showing you how much she's actually retained. We've reached the end of this journey through female memory psychology, and I want you to walk away with something fundamental. The signals I shared with you today aren't tricks or manipulation. They're the way the human brain has evolved to communicate attachment and emotional investment. Every time a woman brings back something small you said, every time she mentions you to her friends, every time she remembers something private you told her, she's communicating something her words might never say outright. Your job now is to pay attention, really pay attention, because I guarantee that in your next conversations with women, you're going to start noticing things that used to slip right past you, and once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. But remember, these signals are just the beginning. They're the door, not the destination. What you do with that information, how you use it to build something genuine, respectful, and real, that's entirely up to you. And speaking of connection and signals you can't afford to ignore, what you just learned are signs of attachment, but there's a completely different level. There's a point where attachment turns into something far deeper, and trust me, the difference is enormous. Look, it's one thing for a woman to feel emotionally invested in you, but it's an entirely different thing when she's already crossed the line into being completely devoted to you. The behaviors change entirely. The gestures that used to be subtle become impossible to miss, and there are specific signals, some genuinely surprising, that reveal exactly when this shift has happened. Want to know what they are? Then you need to watch the video appearing on your screen right now. If a woman does this, she's already devoted to you. Female psychology. This video is the perfect continuation of everything you just learned. It's going to show you exactly which behaviors reveal that a woman isn't just interested anymore, but fully devoted. And when you combine the knowledge from both videos, you're going to have an understanding of female behavior that most men will never come close to. The video is right there on your screen. Click on it now, because what you're about to learn could completely change the way you read the women in your life.